The Tadano GR-1000XL is a rough terrain crane and it can lift a maximum of 91 tonnes. The box is a little bit unusual because initially it comes wrapped in some Tadano wrapping paper. Inside the box is quite smart with a line drawing of the real crane. But one thing you won't find on it is any indication of the maker, but it's understood to be Replicars of Japan. Also, there's no information at all about the real crane. As is customary at this time in the proceedings, we reach in and pull out the insides. And it's nice that the trays have finger tabs that you can get hold of. Tucked in the box is an instruction sheet for the model, and it covers two variations of the crane. The sheet is actually very good because it covers a lot of detail in terms of the parts that have to be fitted and how you reeve it up, and it's got English and Japanese text. So on with opening the box, it is factory sealed, so we cut the tape, and as we gently ease it off, we can see that inside the parts are well packed. There's a bit of assembly to do to get the model into a transport mode, so the first thing to do is to put the main hook on. And as far as reeving goes, that's an easy enough job on this model. There's a tying off point at the boom head, and that's easy enough to use. The thread also has a stiff glued end, which helps. To travel in transport mode, the boom is lowered, we let out some thread on the hook, and then we can hook it onto a loop at the front. The next job to do is to fit some mirrors, and this particular one allows the operator to view the winches when they're operating. The next one goes on the opposite side of the crane from the operator's cab. The last one goes onto the roof of the cab, and it lets the operator see the winches using the mirror that we fitted first. There is a spare single line hook, and that goes in its own holder on the front. And the last thing to do to get the crane into transport mode is to put the fly jib onto the holders on the side of the boom. Looking underneath, the detailing is fairly simple, but the transmission is modelled. The rubber tyres are good and they're mounted on reasonable looking wheels. The operator's cab is plastic and there are other plastic parts around the carrier, and the body casting is simple and plain. Detailing inside the cab is quite good with the console and controls visible, and at the back the winches have got some hydraulic hose detailing. The outriggers are metal with the pistons having a visible screw thread. The main boom ram has a plastic jacket and there's some detailing on the boom itself. There are two similar versions of the main hook block with the model. This is the single hook and there's a double hook version. The pulleys in the boom top and the hook block are metal, but they are single castings rather than separate pulleys. The fly jib is a nice metal part and here it is resting on plastic supports attached to the boom. A nice single line metal hook is provided and it also has a cover. We'll start by looking at the crane in Australian mode, and the wheels spin freely and there's also steering on each of the axles. One good feature is that there's full suspension on each of the wheels. With a quick somersault the crane is the right way up, so let's give it a spin. And it rolls solidly and smoothly. You can also see that the suspension works very well with a good range of movement. The angle you can achieve on the steering is not huge, but it's worth having. And you can replicate all of the modes, including crab steering. You can set the wheels to have the crane turning, but the angle's fairly shallow. Moving a rough terrain crane between sites requires heavy haulage, and here it is being loaded onto a low bed. That's it, Mr. Operator, take it nice and steady. Yep, that'll do. Of course, when you're on a transporter you need to reduce the headroom, so that's why giant hands have come out of the sky and lowered the boom. Now we're getting silly because in real life no low loader is joined together by giant hands like this. With all that said, the crane does make a great looking haulage load. But of course we want the crane to lift things, so here it is arriving on site and we can set the outriggers. The outrigger beams pull out smoothly and you can lower the pads just by unscrewing. If all the pads are lowered then it will support the crane wheels free. The next thing to do is to set the crane up, so firstly we unhitch the hook from its transport loop. And then the boom can be raised up just by lifting it. The main boom ram is reasonably stiff, so it does take a bit of effort to raise it up. But it might wilt back down over time, so a special pin is provided to lock it. It's actually quite unusual because the locking position is right under the end of the boom. It works well enough, but it's only for locking the boom at the steepest angle. With the boom up we can test the slewing motion and the crane rotates smoothly. Moving back to the boom, we can now extend the telescopic sections and they just pull out. There's enough friction in the system that they don't drop back down. Unfortunately, you can also see that the lack of separate pulleys in the hook and boom top means that the hoist rope doesn't flow freely. Each telescopic section locks at full extension with a spring clip, and to lower the boom back down you need to press that spring clip in and then you can lower the boom. So with all the setup done, the crane is now in a ready to work position. There are 5 sections in the boom and at full extension you get quite a big model, so let's get the measuring tape out. And to the top of the boom it's about 39 inches or 1 metre. Another configuration is to use the fly jib. It's a folding jib so it gets quite large when it's opened up, or you can just use it as a folded jib because there's a pulley in the end. On cranes etc. we like to go large, so we'll open up the fly jib and then use a pin to lock it in position. To attach the fly jib it gets offered up to the boom head, and a couple of long steel pins get used to lock it into position. Once that's done there's one more pin to put in and that locks the angle of rake on the jib. The next thing to do is to run some line from the auxiliary winch, take it to the end of the fly jib and put it through the cover of the hook and then tie it onto the hook. Once that's done the fly jib is fitted and it's ready to be raised and put to work. With the fly jib on, the height of the model is increased to over 51 inches or 1.3 metres. In addition to being straight, the fly jib can be set at one of 2 offset angles. The steel pin is removed from the ratchet and then it's replaced when you've got the angle that you want. This is quite a nice feature because it does give some different posing possibilities. This is a good looking model of a Tadano rough terrain crane. There's a bit of plastic on it and the details are not up to the best of modern standards, but the functionality is good, so if you like crane models then it's recommended.